If you're trying to conceive, you have probably come across no shortage of different advice. One person tells you to have sex every day. The next person says you need to save all that sperm for ovulation. One person tells you need to have sex in this position. Another person tells you to not worry about a single thing. It will happen when it happens. It doesn't take long before you're left wondering what you're actually supposed to believe. The challenge is that fertility is one of those areas where good information often gets mixed in with personal experiences, outdated beliefs, and myths that have been around for so long and heard so often that they're actually mistaken for facts. Now, while some of these myths are harmless, others could actually leave you focusing on completely the wrong things, leading you to miss opportunities to enhance and boost your fertility and get pregnant faster. So in this video, I'm going to walk through the 10 most common fertility myths that I hear in clinical practice. We'll look at where these beliefs come from, what the truth in it actually is, and most importantly, what you can take away from the myth and what you can do to better your chances of conception. By the end of this video, you'll have a much clearer picture of the advice that you should actually be paying attention to and what you politely thank the person for giving you, but then let fade into the background. So without wasting any more of your time, let's get right into it. And we'll start off with myth number 1, which is you are fertile all month long. If you've watched my video on finding your fertile window, you will know that no, you are absolutely not fertile all month long, which is a very different narrative to the general belief around sex and pregnancy. In school and in early adulthood, the message is usually never have sex if you don't want to get pregnant, because even just one time can result in a pregnancy. Now, this bit of advice is kind of like a half truth, because yes, absolutely, sometimes it does only take one time to fall pregnant. However, the important information surrounding that statement is you have to be having sex at the right time in order for that to happen, and not just any time throughout the cycle. And that one special time where you can get pregnant is called the fertile window. And it only lasts around 6 days in an entire cycle, which in a 28-day cycle is only 20% of the whole cycle and not 100% of the whole cycle. So why then, if this advice is half true, do I say it's not great advice? And that's because if you are trying to conceive and putting a lot of pressure on yourself to be having sex every single day so that you're monopolizing on the cycles that you're trying to get pregnant, you could really be overwhelming yourself and putting so much unnecessary pressure on you and your partner. Another reason why it's not the best advice is you do really need to know when the important part in that cycle is, that where you can get pregnant, the fertile window. Because if you have the idea that every day is a fertile day and you're having sex as much as possible to capitalize on every day of the cycle, but you happen to miss a few days for whatever reason, your partner's traveling, you've not been feeling well, you've had family over, there's been a particular event that's just caused you not to be able to have sex, but you in the back of your mind think to yourself, oh, well, that's okay. I've only missed a week out of this whole month, but I've had sex every other day. If you're not having sex in that week that is important, in those 6 days that are important, it doesn't matter how much sex you are having in the month. You cannot get pregnant. So it's better to know that that's not the rule, that you can get pregnant any day of the cycle, and know what days you can get pregnant so that you can organize your calendar with your family or your work, or just, organize your life in general to make sure that you and your partner are together over the important time. And also, if you're not the kind of couple that's having sex every day, if that is just not part of what you guys and your normal routine is like, then you don't need to be putting added pressure on yourself to try and be having more sex than necessary. If you're having sex in your fertile window, that's enough. And sex any other time in the cycle, well, that's just for fun. And that brings us to myth number 2. Ovulation happens on day 14 of your cycle. So this idea comes from the theory that every woman has this beautiful textbook 28-day cycle. And with having a lovely 28-day cycle, and with ovulation usually happening around 14 days before the start of the next cycle. So having a luteal phase that's 14 days long, then 28 minus 14 is 14, and therefore ovulation should technically take place on day 14. However, the problem with this myth or half-truth comes in that not every woman has a 28-day cycle. In fact, research has shown that only around 12% of women have a 28-day cycle, which means that the other more than 80% of women do not have a typical 28-day cycle, and therefore they cannot go on the generalization that ovulation happens on day 14. And I'd like to take that a little step further, in that even if you do have a 28-day cycle, that doesn't always mean that ovulation is going to, as a rule, happen on day 14. Ovulation can change depending on a number of things: illness, stress at work, deadlines breathing down your neck, undereating, overtraining, an infection somewhere along the line. All of these things that aren't necessarily thought of as being part of a fertility influencer can actually influence the length of your cycle or the day that you ovulate. And therefore, going on day 14 being the day that you're ovulating, and you go to your calendar and mark around day 14 as D-Day, well, you could really be missing the day of ovulation. And again, if you've watched my video on finding your fertile window, you will know that if you miss ovulation and that egg is released and you don't get sperm to that egg within 24 hours after ovulation has happened, well, then again, it doesn't matter how much sex you're having, you're not going to get pregnant because that egg will no longer be viable. So what you can do rather, instead of focusing on a particular day or date on the calendar, is you are going to look at tracking when you are fertile and when ovulation is happening for you. And you can do that through tracking your cervical mucus, tracking the length of your cycle, using OPKs, all of those tracking tools that I cover in this video that I'll link up here, that tells you when you are going to ovulate and when you are fertile. So throw the calendar away and focus more on what your body is showing you and go according to that because it's way more accurate. And so since we've now mentioned cycle tracking, I want to talk about myth number 3, which is assuming that by tracking basal body temperature, you'll know when you're ovulating. So while tracking your basal body temperature, which is the lowest temperature that your body gets to when it's at rest, and it's under the hormonal control that regulates your cycle, it is a retrospective indicator of ovulation. So what I mean by that is that it tells you after you have ovulated, not when you are going to ovulate. So if you're tracking your cycle, amazing. I love that for you. And I hope that if you're not tracking your cycle yet, this is kind of getting you to think about all these things that you can do to help pinpoint when is the right time for you to be having sex. But if you're tracking your basal body temperature and you're waiting for that rise in temperature that happens in the luteal phase, you are once again missing the day of ovulation and missing your fertile window. And if you're waiting for a rise in basal body temperature and you see it, it's too late. It's too late to be having sex. You need to be having sex before the rise in your basal body temperature, before ovulation happens. And then you can use tracking your basal body temperature to confirm that ovulation has happened, which is also an important part of the cycle tracking piece, because then you know that you're not having anovulatory cycles. But rather than only focusing on basal body temperature, I would then start incorporating looking at other things that can tell you when you're going to ovulate, as opposed to only confirming that you've ovulated. And as I said in the previous point, that is looking at cervical mucus, your cycle length, and using things like OPKs. Now, when you start looking at things like your basal body temperature and your cervical mucus and charting as a whole, and you go down that rabbit hole, you will come across tons of apps that tell you that they can predict when you're going to ovulate. And that brings me to myth number 4, which is apps can tell you exactly when you ovulate. And again, for me, this is one of those half-truths, because yes, some apps can give you an indication when you're going into the fertile window. But, and here's where the myth comes in, they only can tell you when you are approaching ovulation if you are inputting daily real-time data into them for them to interpret. Apps on their own, without you putting in all this kind of data, cannot accurately predict or tell you when you're going to ovulate. So what they actually do is they go on like a balance of probability and a law of averages. So they will assume things like every woman has a 28-day cycle and that ovulation always happens on day 14. And like I've just mentioned, that's actually nonsense. Where apps can help you predict when you're going into your fertile window is if you are putting your daily things that you're tracking into them to use as data that helps generate their predictions. So you need to be putting in your basal body temperature daily. You need to be putting in what you find when you're tracking your cervical mucus. You need to be putting in any results that you get from using OPKs and tracking your cycle length and all of that kind of stuff. When these apps have that kind of information, they are much more likely to work out and calculate however they're designed to know when you are approaching ovulation. But as a straightforward app, no, they can't. And so therefore, the thing that you can do to avoid being misguided by apps is learn how to do it on your own. Learn how to cycle track for yourself, and then you just use apps as either a storage place or as a tool to kind of confirm what you yourself are seeing. But if you learn how to chart your own cycle, you can know what is going on in your cycle and determine when you're going into your fertile window better than any app ever could. So I'd rather focus on learning how to do that than focus on finding the perfect app and paying and all of that kind of stuff when you can actually do it for free. Fertility myth number 5 is abstaining from ejaculation for a long time helps save up sperm, which improves your chances of getting pregnant. Now, logically, I will say that this myth almost makes sense. I mean, if you think about it, you want a good, healthy concentration of sperm that is available to get to an egg during ovulation. And here the thought would be the more the merrier, right? So don't have sex and save up that sperm as much as you can. And then when it gets to ovulation, you're just going to have this amazing quantity that's full of sperm, and then you're going to get pregnant. The problem comes in with this is that when a man does not ejaculate for an extended period of time, so let's say you're only planning on having sex in that fertile window and you're going like a month in between having sex, what will happen when you eventually do have sex is there will be a very large volume of sperm, but it's not necessarily healthier. In fact, the converse is actually true, because the longer the sperm is present inside the man and it's exposed to everything that he is exposed to, so everything he eats, everything he drinks, any medication he's taking, environmental factors, being really hot and sweaty in the car over the entire month, anything that's affecting him is affecting what's going on in his body. And the sperm that is present is actually then more susceptible to damage because of all of these environmental factors. So although you might have a bigger quantity of semen, it might not actually be full of good quality sperm. So if you are a couple that's on a fertility journey and you're seeing a fertility specialist and they're wanting to do a semen analysis, or you're gearing up for IVF or IUI or something like that, you will get specific instructions of how long to abstain for before the procedure goes ahead, whatever procedure it might be. And it's really important to stick to that. So if the doctor says that they want you to abstain for 3 days before, abstain for 3 days. Don't abstain for 3 weeks, because it is going to change things. The same can be said for if you're trying naturally. So don't limit having sex with your partner because you're trying to save up sperm for when you're in your fertile window. No, go and have sex like you're normally having it. And then just make sure that when you're in your fertile window, that you're having sex around every 1 to 2 days. Because that means that there is a high turnover of sperm. So there's constantly a regeneration of better quality sperm that is being pushed out. And then you don't run the risk of having these like old fraught sperm cells that have been in there for I don't know how long coming through. And this now brings me to myth number 6, which is that stress has nothing to do with fertility. Now, this is a really polarizing topic because you often have two extremes of thought when it comes to stress and fertility. So on the one side, there is this belief that stress affects your fertility. And that's why people tell you just go and relax, go on holiday, do all the things, because when you're not stressed, you'll get pregnant. Okay? And then there is the other side of the coin that stress does not affect fertility, because if fertility was so affected by stressful situations and the rates of stress and all of that, we'd never have any children at all, because we live in a high stress environment and there's a lot of societal pressure and all of that stuff. So the truth of this myth kind of lives down the middle. And that is, yes, stress can impact fertility. However, stress does not make you infertile. So if you are somebody that does have a high stress job and that is like generally a worrywart like I am, please don't feel that your stress is stopping you from having a baby, because that is a lot of pressure to put on you, and then you're going to stress about that, and then you're going to be stressed about being stressed, and yes, we don't want that. What I want you to understand is that stress is there, we have stress, and stress can actually make things a little bit difficult. But there are ways to manage stress and overcome the effects of stress while still being in a stressful situation. So we can't just give up our jobs when we want to have a baby. We can't stop worrying about things when we want to have a baby. The world doesn't go on holiday and like everything takes a nice little break when we want to have a baby. The stresses are always there. And what you can do is learn ways to manage and work through stressful events, and that will still help and give you a chance to get pregnant. So it's not all doom and gloom. And this ties very closely in with myth number 7, and that is, there is nothing you can do to affect your fertility. Now, this one I feel personally very strongly about, because as much as this sounds like absolute nonsense, this was the exact thing I was told when I myself went through my own fertility issues. And the fertility doctor, the specialist that I went to see, told me it's just unlucky that I have this infertility diagnosis and there's nothing I can do about it. So I need not try and do anything about it. Like, go home and don't stress, there's nothing you can do about it. And for me, this was such a disempowering bit of advice. And what an absolute load of nonsense. Because I myself went down an absolute rabbit hole of looking at ways to improve my fertility. And I found so much information on things that you can do, lifestyle changes that you can adopt, supplements that you can take, all of that kind of stuff that absolutely can push the needle in the right direction. So this for me is like a flat out lie myth. And unless you're struggling with something significant that a lifestyle factor can't change, so things like blocked fallopian tubes, or having a blind vas deferens, or having gone through chemotherapy and, had to have a hysterectomy and stuff like that. Obviously, in situations like that, no, lifestyle factors are not going to help. But with everything else, I would say that lifestyle factors can definitely improve the overall health of your body. So it might not necessarily have a massive direct effect on your fertility alone, but it is definitely going to make your whole body healthy. And remember that your fertility is not in isolation to your body. Your fertility is not this little island that kind of lives alone and is not affected by the general health of your body. So when you make your body better, you are inadvertently making your fertility better. So even if you have been given an infertility diagnosis, or perhaps the doctors have told you that you have unexplained infertility, or whatever the case is, please don't feel like there is nothing you can do and that's the end of the road for you. Make your lifestyle changes. Improve your diet. Look at supplements that are specific for you. Get better quality sleep. Exercise. Make sure that you're not living off junk food and highly processed foods, and decrease the amount of toxins that are in your environment. Do all the changes anyway and see what that does for you and if that improves your fertility. Okay, now that I've mentioned that there are things that you can do to improve your fertility, and one of those things is taking supplements, I want to talk about the next myth, which is taking every supplement will help you get pregnant faster. And once again, I have been a victim of this myth myself. And when I went through my fertility struggles, and I was on as many Facebook groups as I could find, and I was obviously speaking to a lot of other women that were struggling with infertility as well, you share stories of success and advice and all of that stuff. And you will often hear that this person took this vitamin and this person took this supplement and this person is taking that antioxidant. And then you get your little notebook out, like what I did. I had my little cell phone app. And every time I heard of a new supplement or something like a root or a herb or whatever that helped somebody get pregnant, I thought, okay, well, let me add that to my list, because if I'm taking all of these things that have helped everybody else get pregnant, then I'm covering all of my bases. And then surely that's going to help me get pregnant. And that is very far from the truth for a number of reasons. Number one, taking massive amounts of supplements at really high doses can actually take you from a beneficial therapeutic range of the supplements into a toxic range. And we don't want to do that. We want to make our bodies healthy, not toxic. And sometimes this happens indirectly and you don't even know that you're doing it, because you're taking, say, CoQ10, and then you're taking vitamin D, and you're taking vitamin C, and you're taking something else. And those are the active ingredients that you're trying to take in. But when you actually look at the supplement label, you will see that this active ingredient is connected to something else. So chemically connected to something else. Like maybe it is in a capsule and the solution, the liquid that's in the capsule is a vitamin A solution. And then you're taking something else that also has vitamin A in it, as not the active ingredient, but as like just part of the makeup of the supplement that you're taking. And then by the time you add all of the vitamin A's together, you're taking so much vitamin A that it has become toxic. And the same can be said for things like vitamin D. They also are fat-soluble vitamins, so they have an accumulatory property in your body, meaning that you take it and it goes and gets stored in your body, and the more you take, the higher your levels get, and that's where you can go into this toxic level. Another reason why it's not a good idea to take absolutely everything that you are reading about or hearing about is not everything is meant for every person based on their biology. So I like to use vitamin D as this example, but another example could also be something like DHEA. When I was going through my infertility stuff, DHEA was like this thing that you took just in case. It was getting everybody pregnant. And in where I live in South Africa, you couldn't just get it off the shelf. It needed to be prescribed, and I very badly wanted to get this because everybody that was talking to me was using DHEA and was getting pregnant. The problem is that unless you know how much DHEA you have in your body, supplementing with it can also make you go way over your limit. And DHEA is like a precursor to testosterone. So if I was taking too much of it, what I would actually be doing is increasing my testosterone and my androgens, and that would put all of my hormones out of sync. So unless you get yourself tested for these certain things, and there's so many that you probably don't know of all the tests that you can get done, you might actually already be in a normal range, but because everybody else is taking this vitamin, you also want to take it and then putting yourself in an abnormal range. So you're literally defeating the purpose. And that happens, like I say, with things like DHEA, vitamin A, vitamin D, those sorts of things. Iron is another one. You don't just want to be supplementing iron if you don't need it, because it can be bad for you. The third reason why it's not a good idea to just take absolutely everything is a lot of medications compete with each other. They either cancel each other out, or they have reactions with each other, or they compete for binding sites. So you take one and it attaches to the binding sites, and then you take the next one and that has nowhere to go. So you've almost taken it in vain. And that's kind of the trap that you fall into when you just take absolutely everything. And when I say I was taking everything, I think at one point I was taking like 30 different supplements. And that's not 30 different pills, that was 30 different supplements. So some of them needed to be taken twice a day, some of them needed to be taken 3 times a day. So I was like taking heaps of supplements multiple times a day. And let me tell you, that is stressful. So then there went to increasing my stress level, which is what you not want to do. You want to manage stress and not increase overwhelm. And I was absolutely increasing my overwhelm. So please don't feel like you are not going to be covering all your bases or falling short if you're not taking absolutely every little thing that everybody else is taking. And this is one area where I would say maybe work alongside a practitioner, a dietitian, a homeopath, a doctor, whatever the case is, and get yourself tested and tell them all the things that you're taking, because they will know like what is going to compete with other things or what shouldn't be taken. You know, something must be taken in the morning and the next supplement must rather be taken in the evening, something along those lines. So work with somebody that knows what they're doing and don't feel pressurized to take everything. Then coming to myth number 9, and that is that infertility or fertility struggles is only a woman's problem. I want to tear my hair out with this one, because research actually shows that male factor actually contributes around 50% of infertility issues. So that tells us that infertility is not sexist. It will affect men and women in the same degree. And therefore, if the woman in the equation is the only one thinking that she is the reason for pregnancy not happening, you could literally be missing 50% of a picture if you're not looking at what's happening with the man as well. Also, that puts so much unnecessary pressure on the poor woman, because it's really horrible to be trying to get pregnant and you're not, and thinking that the problem is all on you. And unless a man is getting tested, you don't know for sure. So just like there are tests for women, there is also a test for men. Men can go and get a semen analysis. And it's a very quick and easy test. It's relatively non-invasive. And then you will be able to have a baseline to look at to see if the men's sperm is healthy. And so what I want you to remember here is that fertility and trying to conceive and planning for pregnancy is a team sport. It's men and women. It's husband and wife. It's two partners coming together as a team to get pregnant. And therefore, the responsibility to be healthy and well is actually on both parties and not just one. And now we're at myth number 10. And this is for my ladies who do go and get themselves tested and come back with an AMH that is low. So this is probably one of the most anxiety-provoking tests that women go and do, because this test has somehow become synonymous with your chances of getting pregnant and fertility. So if you end up with an AMH that is low, a lot of women think, well, that's it, I'm done. I'm out of the race. I cannot get pregnant. The problem is with me, and that's that. And that is so far from the truth. But I will tell you that I was one of those people that suffered with really low AMH. And this number haunted me. Every time I went to get a test, I obsessed about what my AMH would be. And basically what your AMH is an indication of how many eggs are left in the ovary, which is only relevant when you are going to do IVF. Because it gives the doctors a little bit of an idea of how you're going to respond to IVF treatment. What it does not do is tell you that you will not get pregnant. It does not test egg quality, which is actually super important. And it does not give you statistics for getting pregnant naturally. So if you're a lady that's had this test done and you've come back with a very low AMH, please do not despair. It does not mean that you are infertile. It just means that you have a lower amount of eggs than somebody else in the same age range as you. It is merely a test to see how many eggs they can recruit during the stimulation phase of an IVF cycle. And obviously, doctors want to recruit as much as possible so that you don't have to go through that same procedure so many times. And that is all that AMH value tells you, is how many eggs they can recruit in an IVF cycle. It does not tell you that you cannot get pregnant. It does not tell you that you can't try naturally. It doesn't tell you that your eggs are rubbish quality. Okay, so there you have it. Those are the 10 most common fertility myths that I hear in clinical practice. and maybe you've heard some of them yourself. If you have any others that you've heard repeatedly, are not sure whether it is a myth or a half-truth or just absolutely bogus or whatever, leave me a message in the comments and I'll absolutely research it and try and answer you. As a bonus to this episode, I'm going to throw in one more fertility myth, and that is that you only do fertility testing if you suspect there is a problem. So many people believe that you only get these tests done if something has gone amiss or if you are suspecting that you are infertile. And that could also not be further from the truth. I always explain it this way. If you are going to go on a road trip and you've got your car, you take your car for a service before you go on a road trip because you want them to check your tires and your oil and whatever else they check. I'm not a car person, but you send it to be tested, not because you think that the engine is going to fall out while you're driving. You do it to make sure that if there are any little tweaks that could be made, or if there's any little changes that need to happen, or something be replaced or whatever, you learn about it in the early days when you can do something about it, rather than get halfway through your trip, end up with an issue, and then end up stranded on the side of the road. So I look at fertility testing exactly the same way. You don't do testing because you suspect that there is a problem. You merely go and do the test and have the bloods done or the ultrasound or whatever the case is to make sure that when you start your fertility journey, which is one of the biggest events that you can prep for, you get these tests done to see where you are, to see where your fertility is at. And remember, it's not just for the ladies, it's for the men as well. So if you want to know more about this fertility testing, what it involves, what they look at, and how it's all done, then subscribe to this because I'll be doing that episode soon and I don't want you to miss it. Thank you so much for watching this video. I will catch you in the next one. Take care and goodbye.